Hey, all, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew talking about exploration, how to make it fun and exciting for your players in your world. We often divide D&D into the three pillars of exploration, combat, and role play, whether that's too simplistic or not. Oftentimes when you see games advertised for online play, they'll divide the percentages of how much it is between those three. Again, the thing is, we're familiar with combat in terms of that's the way the players and the monsters are laid out with hit points and how much damage they do, and we all role play, social interaction all the time in the real world. We're not always exploring, or are we? We are to a certain extent, as we'll see. So, and I think, exploration sometimes gets a short shrift in terms of its place in the game and how it actually impacts the player's enjoyment of being in your homebrewed world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify kind of the essence of, I think, of what exploration is, and then the different types of exploration that come off that kind of central concept, and then some parameters of how you can tweak that once you've identified the kind of exploration that you're doing in your world so that you can make it more exciting or grander scale or a small scale, as you'll see. All right, so when you're thinking about the players exploring your homebrewed world, the key is that exploration is about discovery. That's what drives people to go to remote areas in the real world, and that's the concept that's going to make the exploration of your world by the players fun and compelling. Everything derives from this concept of discovery, whether the players are doing it for profit, renown, or merely to have the distinction of being the first one to discover something or see something. And that's what's going to motivate people, in the real world as well, in terms of the dangers involved, the risks. And once you've identified what that discovery is about and how it relates to the players in the world, then you can tweak the process to decide what's the scale. Is there a ticking clock? How much is involved? Is this going to be a long period of time or short? All right, so the most common motive for discovery in D&D is treasure, right? Those of you that are playing an OSR game right now know what it was like when I played with my friends 40 years ago. Treasure got you experience. It was very valuable. And like it does today, it bought you all sorts of things. This really motivates people. And the pursuit of wealth is what motivated many explorers in the real world, whether it was the search for the pharaoh's treasure in ancient times, the conquistadors searching for El Dorado, the city of gold, or you have the pirate, wrecked treasure hunters of today. So never discount the appeal of a treasure hoard to your players, whatever the system is, because not only does it bring them the means to buy stuff, but it also brings them renown because, when you become wealthy like this, the other people in the various communities where the players, their home base or whatever, they become powerful figures. They can buy into that community. Because as a great philosopher once said, humans of all kinds of cultures and time periods are above all one thing, and that is greedy. So use that to your advantage. So I'm going to talk about treasure as something that you sprinkle in, even in other types of discovery, that it isn't just purely to find a great treasure hoard. Sometimes it is the distinction of being the first. The motive to climb the highest mountain in the world or to plunge to the greatest depths of the ocean isn't always about, the financial reward as much as having that distinction of being the first one to do it. Finding the source of the Nile had no real commercial implications. It was just to that distinction of being the first person to do so. And it was a purely cultural discovery because people had lived around the source of the Nile for tens of thousands of years, just like the North Pole. When Perry and Hansen discovered it, the Inuit people had been back and forth there many, many times, and they just didn't know it was the magnetic pole. And that was the thing. In a culture that recognizes here is the magnetic North Pole, there is a distinction to be the first one of that culture to get there. And don't discount that kind of discovery in your world, especially a homebrewed world. Of course, they want to find treasure and get magic items and stuff, but to be the first one to see some long-lost temple or to go to some volcano, no humanoid has ever gone here and they found this ancient, all those kind of things are very enticing. Why? Because in the homebrewed world, you've created this framework for the storytelling. You've created this story, and it isn't like a module where you're reading this off and someone else wrote it and was play tested by all sorts of people. This is the first time it's happening. Your players are truly, in a real sense, the first ones to encounter these things. So play up the fact that these, remote temples or mountains or undersea worlds, this is the first time that any, sentient humanoid, or for the first time in 100,000 years, has laid their eyes upon this. We base all humanoids in D&D on humans, and there's a natural desire to see what's over that hill. And I call this story treasure, and I put it in a video that I'll provide the link for here. But the important thing is the unfolding of storylines in your world that are discovered by the players has intrinsic value, so don't undersell that. Think about the internet clickbait where you see some guy buys a house, and he goes in the basement and he finds a sealed up tunnel entrance there. And of course, you've got to click through multiple pages to find, he pulls the boards off, he looks in, this and that. Usually it's a big nothing, an abandoned air raid shelter or something like that. But the thing is, we're curious to think about, what if I found a tunnel in there? And imagine if you knew someone that did that, or the thing ended, well, he decided I'm not interested, and he boarded it back up and never explored it. You'd be like, really? You found a tunnel in your basement and you had no curiosity to find out what it is? Well, because we all do have that curiosity. So another motive for discovery is when you have a task. When, let's say, a powerful NPC says, I've got some information here. I want you to go to this place, explore this lost temple or this cave complex or whatever, and find this item and bring it back. And again, what you do is you sprinkle that with treasure. They say, hey, whatever else you find you can keep or whatever. Of course, you have to take the risk. I'm the powerful NPC. I don't want to risk my life with this, so here's this information. Go and get this for me. Or the other thing is the players realize, hey, there's another group that's found this information, and they're asked, you guys, you go and find this before this evil group gets it. Now, there is one thing with task exploration to think about. And this kind of goes into the parameters, but I'll bring it up now. You don't want to railroad. And you don't want to have a task where someone says, I want you to do this, and by the way, if you don't do it by next Tuesday, the entire world is destroyed. Right? Because you're railroading them. You're forcing them into this. It's always best to have something that if they choose not to do it, they can just walk away. And of course, the other thing is make sure you reward the players adequately. If they go find the item of great power and he gives them 300 gold, that's not going to be a fun exploration, right? I mean, they got experience and whatever. Now, again, do you have to give them a Vorpal blade because they did this or whatever, or deck them many things? Not necessarily. You tell them, make it appropriate to the danger level. But the treasure and magic items are always the secret sauce of exploration. They're always hoping that you find something, because greed, my friend, is a powerful thing. So I'm going to add one more thing to my categories of exploration and discovery, which kind of relates to flavor and game mechanics. When I was in my late 20s, early 30s, me and my friends, we've been playing D&D for 10 plus years, and we started to get into talking about sort of the literary theoretical underpinnings of D&D storytelling. Very pretentious, I know, but a lot of other people did this as well. Like, what is it? What can we do that it isn't just, we're already past hack and slash. We're already past simplistic, heroic, oh, you got to do this or the whole world explodes. You got to do that. We are into creating a world and having some mystery and sense of dread or horror or just wonderment. And we used a lot of the books and movies that we saw to kind of convey this. There's a famous movie directed by Sam Peckinpah, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. And there's a famous scene in which these characters, unknown people on a flatboat, are going down the river and they're shooting at a bottle. Pat Garrett goes and tries to shoot the bottle, and the guy turns the gun on him. They have this showdown, right? And then they decide not to shoot, and the family just goes back down the river. We never see him again. Well, this producer asked Sam Peckinpah, what the hell does that mean? How does that scene move anything forward? We don't know who these people are. They never see him again. It has nothing to do with it. And he said, it's existential violence, right? That's what it means. Well, the producer was furious, but they kept it in. Now, there's another very interesting scene that I read in this book, Kaput by Curzio Malaparte. I talked about Malaparte when I did my Wizards Retreat. I based it on his famous house on Capri. This is set in World War II on the Eastern Front. And there's this big battle, and this, because of the explosions and stuff, a huge forest fire. I think it's near Leningrad. And all these horses, wild horses or just, farmers, they ran into the water to get away from this overnight. And it got super cold, and they froze in the water. And then they were frozen. The water froze. Again, he claimed it really happened, but all these horses' heads were all in the water. And soldiers would go out and sit on the horse heads and stuff. And it was this image that just amazed me. And that's why he put it in there. And I have used a version of both of these scenes in my D&D campaigns where the players discover some tableau like the horse heads or some group like on the raft, where it doesn't really lead to anything. It doesn't give them any clues about anything. It's just sort of a thing to lend sort of a reverse verisimilitude to the world, that there are strange things that happen. There are people that have nothing to do with the storyline. They just lend credence to the existential violence of this world is a dangerous place, or bizarre things happen like these horses. How are they frozen? Now in D&D, of course, you assume it's some spell that was thrown or whatever, and the players investigate, but it leads to nothing. Because the thing is, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And this is the game mechanic thing I'm talking about. Sometimes you make a discovery, and in this case, maybe you're just exploring the world, right? And you make this discovery, but it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't mean anything. And not every discovery is just a clue laid out for the players to, we've got to look into this. Sometimes a cave is just empty. There's nothing there. Sometimes the village is abandoned and there's nothing there. There's something creepy or weird or whatever, or unusual, but it doesn't always have to align to storylines. This is this reverse verisimilitude, right? Where there are things that are just strange. Now, I mentioned that just as a flavor thing. Really, what I'm going to talk about next in terms of the parameter are the three: the pure wealth, the discovery for its own sake, and then, of course, the task where you have to find some item or whatever, and talk about how to make those, more exciting, more heartfelt, change the scope of them, change the pace of them, and play that up and do that in different facets of the discoveries in your world. And you want to mix up the types of discoveries such that exploration is really interesting. The most obvious is, making the difficulty of a discovery, right? So you think of the Tomb of Horrors, and, that was a treasure trove. That, Demi-Lich had a great treasure if you look in the module, but what it's known today for is the difficulty of getting that treasure. All the deadly traps, puzzles, monsters, everything that was in there. It was almost impossible to get to the end. And this is what gave it this incredible legendary status, whatever you think of it if you've actually played it. And you can do that with anything. You can have things like the players have to go through this incredible lava field or some polar region, incredibly deadly, or just nasty monsters, or, they come up against stuff where they can't figure out how to get through this. The thing about this is, this is going to turn into an epic type adventure, but if you're going to have those super, difficult traps and monsters and stuff, then you probably want to have an epic reward, whether it's a great treasure or some item or something that renown gets them something in the world. And not just they've, lost players to permanent death and they get to the end and it's 1,000 gold, right? And a +1 sword, something like that. Maybe in your world, that's an unbelievable treasure, but just be prepared if you're going to make it super difficult. But you can have different levels of difficulty, and typically you'll peg those to the rewards. But remember, renown itself, you've discovered the legendary falls and you come back and suddenly you have an audience with the king. And now you're on his radar. Well, that's worth something. Another thing you can do to increase the urgency of discovering something is when you have a ticking clock. This is where the players have to, they've been tasked to go get something before some catastrophe occurs. They have to go get the artifact and bring it back. They have to go and turn the sundial. They have to do something such that something bad doesn't happen. Now, you got to be careful with a ticking clock if you're going to combine that with a deadly adventure, or as we'll see, when you have an incredible scope of an adventure. Because if you're in a system, let's say, with a long rest, and it's very deadly, the players are going to want to take a long rest to get their spells back. But in a system without one, they still have to rest to get spells to cure themselves up or whatever. And if you've got this ticking clock where you can't rest, and it's super difficult, or it's gigantic in scope, they have to go to the 12th level of a dungeon, work their way down, and then get back up, you're going to want to slow down on your ticking clock, or give them a means to stop that clock temporarily. Go to this dial and change it, and that gives you 5 extra days, something like that. But you could just make it 5 extra days, right? So the ticking clock is always fun for excitement, but just be careful in terms of the difficulty of this discovery. So another parameter is the scope of the exploration. Is it something that they have to go here and there and here and there, and it's over vast geographical areas? Obviously, as I said, you can't use a ticking clock. It's going to take some time. And another thing is importance. Is this discovery the holy grail of the entire civilization of your homebrewed world? Let's say that every sentient humanoid knows that they all came from some other dimension in the far distant past, and nobody knows what it is. And the players have an opportunity to discover the last portal to that other dimension. That's a big discovery, right? And that would be something that, first of all, the players may want to keep it close to their vest if they understand what it is, and probably going to be guarded by difficult things, probably going to be a reward if they get there, identify it, come back. Maybe some powerful figure says, I'll pay you this much for the map to it. Maybe they realize when they get there, oh, we don't want to tell anybody where this is for some reason. So importance. But here's the thing. There can be unimportant discoveries that are just as compelling to your players. So there's a widow who some NPC disappeared at some Orcan battle, and she wants to find out, what happened to him. And the players go and they find a remains, and they find something that proves that it's this person, and it's a medallion, a wedding medallion. And they bring it back to the widow, and now she's at peace. And maybe she has, maybe she has a little bit of story treasure, some map or something that maybe a few hundred gold, but maybe nothing. I guarantee you that sort of discovery at that scale, that has heart. That has a connection to the verisimilitude of the real world, where people have these, stories, personal stories of this widow wondering what happened, and now that's been laid to rest. Now she can move on with her life. Those little discoveries, those little ones can really give your players a sense that we are accomplishing things. Again, what are the things players talk about at the end of the session? When you're all out in the parking lot, or you're all talking, if you're on Discord or whatever, between sessions, it's oftentimes those little things, those little discoveries that really, impact the players. It's all about the fictional paradox of storytelling, but that's another topic. So I hope that helps. Remember, discovery is the key to exploration. Identify the sort of discovery the players are going to make. Then take the parameters and tweak them to either make it, more exciting, more compelling, more important in your world. And always remember, if it's not purely about treasure, use that, sprinkle it in as your secret sauce to keep the players motivated. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel, leave some comments, tell me about some of the exploration discoveries you've done, but most importantly, keep playing an RPG game, whatever system you prefer, and tell somebody else about it.